One restless night, a man strolled into a dimly lit bar, his boots scuffing against the wooden floor. He ordered a drink, taking deliberate sips as if savoring the weight of each drop. After a moment, he leaned forward conspiratorially and asked the bartender, "Hey, have you ever heard of the legendary blacksmith?" The bartender, caught off guard by such an out-of-the-blue question, furrowed his brow. Legendary blacksmith? That wasn't a name he heard every day. But what truly puzzled him was how eager the stranger seemed to talk about someone who, by all accounts, wasn't the bartender himself. "Never heard of him," the bartender admitted, his curiosity piqued. "Well, then let me enlighten you," the man replied, a spark of excitement lighting up his face. He began recounting the story, his imagination filling with the blacksmith's incredible creations legendary. Unique weapons that defied logic and dripped with power. Of course, this blacksmith's greed was the stuff of legends too. You can't create weapons like that without craving the rarest materials, the visitor mused. And you certainly can't get your hands on those materials without rubbing elbows with some seriously high-ranking folks. The bartender, now intrigued, leaned in closer. "So, he must have some powerful backers, right?" The man shook his head confidently. "Nope, that's the wild part. No patrons, no sponsors, nothing. And yet, even the mighty Tsidak Guild couldn't keep tabs on him for long. They fell apart trying." The bartender, still trying to piece this story together, blinked. "Wait, what? You're telling me this blacksmith managed to secure everything he needed solo?" "Who knows?" the man replied with a shrug. "But before his name became legendary, he once joined a battle against an army of monsters all to gather rare materials for his craft. Though, funny enough, his teammates didn't exactly wait for him. The scene shifted in the man's tale. He described the blacksmith as a boy lagging behind his comrades, watching them charge into battle. His frustration boiled over as he yelled, "So they just left me? Fine, I'll handle this myself." Leaping off a cliff into a writhing sea of monsters, the boy's eyes gleamed with excitement. "Look at all these materials waiting for me," he exclaimed, summoning a sword from his inventory with a flourish. In mere moments, the boy carved through a horde of monsters like they were butter, yelling triumphantly, "I'm the world's best swordsman." Without skipping a beat, he followed it up with, "and the best mage," but one of his comrades, Midslash, couldn't resist poking fun. "Bogeyman, what nonsense are you shouting this time?" Undeterred, the boy surveyed the field littered with weapons. "All right, which one of these beauties should I use next?" he mused, his hand hovering over a particularly mysterious blade. "Ah, perfect. You're the one I need for my first bad sword." Just as he drew the weapon, a pack of monsters lunged at him. Instead of panicking, the blacksmith smirked. "Oh, so you're coming to me now? Great. Let's test this baby out." The storyteller paused, taking a sip of his drink, and then shifted gears. Meanwhile, on the 4th floor of Kokoro Island's infamous dungeon, a boss raid was brewing. The leader of the Silver Knights Guild, flanked by 200 elite players, stood before a cavern of fire. Among them were 8 top players and a figure known as the 16th member of the Sharp Sword Council, a fearsome title. The tension was palpable. "We could conquer a fortress with this crew," the commander thought, wiping the sweat from his palms. Yet, staring into the blazing heat of the 4th-level dungeon boss, the infamous Gao of Hell, his nerves refused to settle. "We spent a fortune upgrading our gear and leveling up," he reminded himself. "And now it's time to see if it's enough." As the timer for the boss's arrival ticked down, a shout pierced the air. "Intruder!" one of the soldiers yelled, pointing toward the entrance. Everyone turned to see a figure cloaked in mystery standing confidently at the mouth of the cave. The commander's mind raced. "Who is this guy?" he wondered, scrutinizing the newcomer's unimpressive frame. "No weapons? Just a cloak?" He grimaced, realizing the guards posted at the dungeon's entrance had been completely bypassed. "If this guy's here, does that mean my guards downstairs are dead?" He scanned the intruder for identification. A name appeared, Grid. "What kind of assassin would make their name so obvious?" the commander muttered. Running a player search turned up nothing. "No matches? Then he's not a player." Confused and irritated, the commander concluded the guards must have been slacking off. "Useless fools," he cursed internally. Yet something about the name Grid nagged at him. And judging by the stranger's unnerving calm, it was clear this intruder wasn't planning on leaving anytime soon. This area is under the control of the Silver Knights Guild, the army commander barked, his eyes narrowing into a suspicious glare at the cloaked figure who had wandered into their cave. I don't know how you got here, he continued, his voice thick with authority, but we're about to start an important battle. If you value your life, you'd better turn back now. The cloaked figure let out a dramatic sigh, the sound heavy enough to echo against the cavern walls. So my invisibility wore off just because of this Helgao character, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Then, with an exaggerated shrug, he reached up and peeled off his cloak, tossing it aside with the flair of someone revealing a plot twist. Well, no point keeping this anymore. Gasps rippled through the ranks of the guild as the figure beneath the cloak was revealed. The weakling the commander had been so ready to dismiss turned out to be a man encased in armor so flashy it practically screamed, "Look at me!" His suit shimmered with steel dragon scales that caught the light, and because subtlety was apparently overrated, a tail swished behind him. "What in the world is that armor?" one soldier blurted, his voice cracking with disbelief. Another jabbed his comrade in the ribs and stammered, "Are you kidding me? That's got to be unique grade gear. Who even is this guy?" The commander, less amused by his men's gawking, barked, "Hey, quit staring and get back in formation." His booming voice was enough to redirect their attention back to him, or at least, it would have been if Helgao, the dungeon boss they'd been waiting 2 weeks to face, hadn't chosen that exact moment to make his grand entrance. "Oh shit, he's here," the commander muttered as the ground began to rumble beneath their feet. The boss, a towering inferno of malevolence and molten rage, emerged in all his fiery glory. A system notification popped up, confirming what they already knew. The Hellfire Master, Helgao, has appeared. Helgao wasted no time asserting his dominance. He roared, shaking the cavern and sending a notification to every player present. Helgao's roar has spread fear and chaos, weakening all players. As if that wasn't enough, another notification followed. Helgao's flames have reduced heat resistance. The players barely had time to regroup before the boss unleashed another attack. Pillars of flame erupted, turning the battlefield into a blazing inferno. Screams echoed as half the guild was wiped out in a single strike. Half the guild, gone. Just like that, the commander whispered in horror. His hands trembled as he clenched his weapon. Even with 86% heat resistance, I'm still going to take serious damage, he thought, already bracing for the inevitable. Despair clouded his voice as he muttered, "We've lost again." But then, something entirely unexpected happened. "Oopsie doopsie," the mysterious intruder said nonchalantly, strolling toward Helgao as if the flames licking at his heels were nothing more than a warm breeze. He moved with such confidence that the remaining guild members could only stare, slack-jawed. "Who is this guy?" the commander thought, his mind racing. "That fire just wiped out half my team, and he's walking through it like it's a sunny day?" Grid, the name displayed above the intruder, ignored the stares and the suffocating heat, striding straight toward the boss. When he reached his destination, he activated his inventory, and a bright, glowing sphere materialized beside him. The commander held his breath, expecting Grid to unleash some devastating attack. Instead, Grid pulled out, "Pickaxe." "A pickaxe?" the commander's thoughts screamed. "What is he doing? Is he mining?" Grid, utterly unfazed by the hellish chaos around him, began chipping away at the cave wall. Sweat poured down his face as he grumbled, "It's so damn hot in here. Why does this or only show up when the boss respawns?" Helgao, understandably offended by being so blatantly ignored in his own lair, raised his weapon with a roar. Flames erupted as he swung directly at Grid, the blast so powerful it sent shockwaves through the cave. The commander winced, certain the arrogant boy had been incinerated. That was a direct hit, he thought grimly. There's no way he survived that. But as the smoke cleared, their Grid stood, unharmed, casually wiping soot off his armor. "Hey, mister," Grid called out, pointing lazily at Helgao. "Can you deal with this guy? It's already way too hot in here, and he's only making it worse." The commander's jaw dropped. "That's your concern? Not the giant flaming monster trying to kill us." Grid flashed a smug smile. "Oh, this? No big deal." Helgao, still enraged, launched another devastating attack. The flames roared, the ground shook, and yet again, Grid stood unscathed. "How are you doing this?" the commander shouted. Grid chuckled, his tone as casual as if they were discussing the weather. "It's all thanks to this little object I crafted," he said, patting his armor. As he continued mining, sweat pouring down his face, Grid muttered to himself, "I spent months on this gear. Totally worth it." Helgao, clearly at the end of his patience, prepared for yet another attack, but Grid didn't seem to care. He had or to collect and a dungeon boss to ignore, and no amount of hellfire was going to change that. Grid was in full flight mode, sprinting for his life as the guards chased him down like a pack of wolves after an injured deer. His breaths came in ragged gasps, his mind racing. Why the hell are they chasing me? What did I even do to deserve this? But there was no time for answers, only escape. Unfortunately, fate decided to up the ante. One of the guards closed in, his blade slicing clean through Grid's poorly protected back. Grid staggered, his body screaming in pain, but his will refused to buckle. He turned, blood dripping, and prepared for the confrontation, his mind screaming, "Am I seriously going to die here?" The guard's leader, Baron Asher, approached with a sneer that could curdle milk. "You fool!" he spat, his voice full of venom. "You abused our trust. Even with a contract, your greed got the better of you." Grid's vision blurred with pain and anger, but he managed to snap back. "Asher, you snake! You tricked me into this in the first place." One of the nobles who had been watching from the sidelines chimed in smugly. "To be honest, I doubted from the start that you could handle this mission, Grid." Those words hit like a punch to the gut. Months of grueling effort, blood, sweat, and literal tears, and they doubted him from the start? Grid glared up at them, his voice trembling with rage. "I've been fighting for months, risking my life every step of the way. Don't you think I deserve something for my efforts?" Baron Asher wasn't moved. In fact, his smirk only deepened. "Of course, you'll be rewarded." His tone darkened, becoming ice cold. "Your reward is death." With a snap of his fingers, one of the guards stepped forward, weapon at the ready. Grid's heart pounded as he faced the inevitable. "I've been risking my life for this damn mission. And this is how it ends?" Desperation clawed at his thoughts. "No, this can't be it. I can't just let it end here." But the story wasn't over. Not yet. This wasn't reality, it was Satisfy, the greatest virtual game ever created, with over 2 billion players worldwide. A game so immersive and vast, it wasn't just a game. It was practically another world. Hidden among its endless lands, unexplored territories far outnumbered those that had been charted by players. And somewhere deep within this untamed frontier was the northern cave of the end, a place shrouded in mystery and danger. It was here, buried in the cave's depths, that Grid had been sent on his fool's errand, to find a legendary artifact. A task he had spent months pursuing with nothing but determination and rapidly draining resources. When Grid finally stumbled upon the object of his quest, an ancient, dust-covered tome lying amidst piles of treasure, he let out a cry of triumph. "I found it! I finally found it!" His eyes brimmed with tears as he cradled the book, exhaustion etched across his face. "This took me so long," he muttered, wiping his face. Any sane player would have given up by now. And then, bitterness creeping into his tone, he spat. "Stupid quest. The money I've blown on potions and gear for this. I can't even think about it without wanting to scream." Still clutching the book, Grid's thoughts turned to Baron Asher, the puppet master who had sent him on this wild goose chase. "If I don't get a proper reward for this, I swear I'll never take another quest from that bastard again." Turning the book over, Grid studied its title, The Book of the Legendary Blacksmith. His breath hitched. This was it. The prize. The reason he'd bled and toiled for months. But of course, Satisfy wasn't about to make it easy. A message popped up, informing him that he needed a specific magical item to unlock the book's secrets. Palladian's Eye. "Of course," Grid groaned, his frustration mounting. Pulling up his inventory, he scanned for the item. "Wow, it's gone up in price?" he muttered, disbelieving. "How much more money does this game want to drain from me? I've already taken out loans just to keep up. This game is going to bankrupt me." For a moment, he let the weight of it all crush him. Then, with a resigned sigh, he reached for the activation button. Well, guess there's always next month to figure out how to pay it off. With a flash, the eye activated, and Grid's screen lit up with a new system notification. You have obtained the legendary item, Pagma's Book. The air left Grid's lungs as he stared at the glowing tome in his hands. A new message appeared. You have uncovered the secrets of Pagma, the legendary blacksmith who transcended human limits. You have become a descendant of Pagma. He could barely contain his joy. A legendary item, he shouted, his voice echoing through the cave. I actually got one. More notifications scrolled across his screen. Your reputation has increased by 500. Grid's grin widened. Finally, something good in this game. Lifting the book high, he began to laugh maniacally. I could sell this for hundreds of millions of won. I'm rich. But then, reality slapped him in the face. His laughter faded, replaced by a grim expression. No, he muttered. I can't just quit the quest. S-rank doesn't come easy. Still, the thought of selling the book lingered, teasing him. Hundreds of millions of won, his mind whispered. But then, the memories came rushing back, his crushing debts, the hours of grueling work, the mocking laughter of people who had written him off. Gaming is all I've got, Grid thought bitterly. Even my friends abandoned me when I chose this path. His grip on the book tightened. No, he wouldn't give up now. Not when he'd come so far. As Grid clutched the legendary book close to his chest, a twinge of guilt flickered through his mind. His family's disappointed faces flashed before him like a slideshow of shame. And my family, he thought bitterly. They started treating me like I'm invisible, just a shadow who eats their food and pays no rent. But now, holding his long-sought prize, Grid's grin stretched from ear to ear. Well, guess what, Mom, Dad, Sis, he whispered to the book. The family slacker just struck gold. Your useless son finally did it. Hugging the item like a long-lost friend, he declared, It's over. My nightmare's done. Time to sell this bad boy and wave goodbye to my miserable life. Brimming with triumph, Grid accessed the game's exit menu. A clean logout and straight to the marketplace, or so he thought. Instead, a cruel system notification popped up. You cannot leave the game at the moment. What? Grid exclaimed, his joy hitting an emergency brake. Before he could process the message, Count Asher materialized in the cave with a battalion of soldiers flanking him. Another notification followed, this time updating his quest. Count Asher's secret request has changed to Count Asher's anger. The Count, his face flushed with fury, pointed an accusatory finger at Grid. You thieving scoundrel, he bellowed. You let greed blind you, and now you dare betray me? Grid froze, his stomach doing somersaults. Oh crap, he thought. It's Asher. Why is he here? The new quest description floated ominously before him. Count Asher has noticed your selfish intent and is enraged. He will attempt to kill you. Selfish intent? Grid blurted out. Are you kidding me? Do you even understand what I've been through to get here? Months of hell? And you're calling me selfish? Unmoved by his protest, the Count sneered. Excuses. Guards, seize him at once. Grid's heart sank as he felt the cold steel of a soldier's sword pressed against his back. Kneeling on the damp cave floor, Grid stared down at the book, his mind racing. Months, he thought bitterly. Months of my life, risking everything for this. Am I really going to lose it all now? But then, defiance bubbled up inside him. No way am I walking away with nothing. With a burst of adrenaline, Grid dodged the soldier's blade and bolted. I'm not dying here, he shouted. Not after all this. Summoning his warrior instincts, Grid turned to face one of the advancing guards. All right, buddy, he muttered. Time to show you why I'm level 73. Using one of his hard-earned skills, Grid charged forward, aiming to shatter the soldier's shield. But his confident smirk quickly faded when the soldier shrugged off the attack as if swatting a fly. What the dash? Grid thought in panic. I barely dented him. Worse, the counterattack took out half his health in one blow. Are you serious? He screamed internally. These guys are busted. Realizing he was hopelessly outmatched, Grid glanced at the dozens of soldiers closing in. Oh no, this is bad, he thought, his legs trembling. Tears of frustration welled in his eyes. I knew my luck was trash. But come on, this is just cruel. His gaze landed on the book tucked in his inventory. Desperation gripped him. If I die, the book's gone. He realized, his chest tightening. I can't replay this quest. I can't lose this. His fingers hovered over the book. If I activate it now, he thought, there's no going back. As if sensing his plan, Count Asher roared from across the battlefield. Stop him! Stop him before he uses it. But Grid, now fully committed, gritted his teeth and shouted, Too late! You idiot! It's mine! With a triumphant grin, he activated the book. A radiant light engulfed him as the system announced. You have unlocked the legendary class, Pagma's Descendant. Grid smirked at the Count's enraged expression. You should have been more careful, Asher, he taunted. You snooze, you lose. As the light faded, new system notifications began flooding in. All skills and stats reset. New skills unlocked. Blacksmith's Patience, Dismantle, and Repair. Legendary blacksmith skills unlocked. Grid stood there in awe, feeling a surge of power coursing through his body. Okay, he thought, flexing his fingers. I'm technically a blacksmith now, but damn, I feel unstoppable. Count Asher, however, was far from impressed. You insolent brat, he shouted. Grid turned, flashing a cocky grin. Seeing you lose your mind like this is priceless, Asher, he said. But I've got some dumbass to beat, so if you'll excuse me. Before Grid could launch into his newfound skills, another system notification blindsided him. Level reset to 1. Equipment removed. Grid's jaw dropped as he realized he was standing in nothing but his underwear. What the dash? He yelled. The next second, one of the Count's level 300 guards lunged, landing a devastating blow. Grid's world spun as his health plummeted to 0. A system message blinked before his eyes. You are dead. Grid slumped forward, defeated. Meanwhile, far away in the real world, a phone rang at the home of Satisfice's lead developer. Picking up the call, the developer listened intently as the task force reported. A player has unlocked the legendary class. A slow smile spread across the developer's face. It's finally happened, he murmured. I wonder who it is. As he grabbed his coat and headed out the door, his excitement was palpable. This is going to be fun, he said, grinning ear to ear. Lying crumpled before Count Asher, Grid, with his last shred of strength, glared up at his accuser. His voice, hoarse but dripping with defiance, rasped. You'd really kill me just for using the item, wouldn't you? Why the hell did you chase me like this? You knew everything from the start. As his breath began to falter, Grid pushed himself to speak one last time. You, scoundrel thief, he added bitterly, his words cutting like dull knives. Stealing what's rightfully mine. That's all this game really is. With one final sarcastic jab, he spat, eat well and live in peace, before succumbing to the inevitable, his body breaking apart into pixels and fading into nothingness. Back in reality, Grid groaned as he pried himself out of the full immersion capsule. His entire body felt like it had been rolled through a wringer. He slumped onto the floor, bags under his eyes dark enough to carry groceries. It's over, he muttered, sitting up and exhaling like an old man climbing stairs. After a pause, he added with a faint smirk, that was something. Exciting, sure, but also 100 million ones worth of pain. He wasn't sure if he meant that figuratively or literally. Before he could dwell on it, his mother's voice boomed from behind him like a wrathful deity. Do you even know what time it is, you useless child? Meanwhile, halfway across the world at the operational headquarters of Satisfy SA Group, a different kind of chaos was brewing. Inside a sleek, state-of-the-art office, the head of the task force, Choi Nahi, entered briskly. Welcome back, sir. She greeted the company's head, Im Chulho. Im Chulho wasted no time. You said someone changed their class 5 minutes ago? His eyes sparkled with intrigue as he continued. I didn't expect it to happen so soon. How fascinating. Yes, sir, Nahi replied, handing over the field report. The player's name is Grid, level 73. Real name, Shin Young-woo. He completed Count Asher's secret request and obtained Pagma's book. According to our data, he's Well, unremarkable. An unemployed player who's been aimlessly wandering the game's endless lands, dying a considerable number of times. Chulho's eyebrows arched as he leaned back in his chair. Unremarkable? Are you sure? Nahi hesitated, then nodded. Yes, sir. He seems to have stumbled upon this purely by chance. Chulho chuckled, shaking his head. Chance? Please, don't make me laugh. Excuse me? Nahi blinked, confused. Leaning forward with a grin, Chulho tapped the report. If Morpheus, our supercomputer, calculated that the northern cave of the End and the Pagma Descendant questline wouldn't open for another 2 years. Yet this guy not only found the cave but completed the questline. Do you really think that's coincidence? Nahi bit her lip. Well, when you put it that way, Chulho pointed at another detail. Look here. His level was too low to even trigger the quest, yet he somehow bypassed it and used the item out of sheer desperation. Sure, it cost him dearly resetting his level and failing 2 parallel quests, but look at what he's gained. Nahi's eyes widened as she pieced it together. Wait, are you saying his negative level gives him more points than any player at this stage? Exactly, Chulho replied, his grin widening. Thanks to this so-called accident, he's statistically ahead of the curve. Isn't that amazing? But, sir, Nahi stammered. Doesn't that mean the game's balance is broken? Shouldn't we fix this immediately? Chulho waved her concern away. There's no need. Honestly, the Pagma Descendant class isn't even that strong compared to others. It's a utility class good for crafting, not fighting. Let him enjoy his little head start. It won't last. As the room fell silent, Chulho stared at the report, deep in thought. Interesting, he murmured before abruptly standing. I'll be gone for a day. Keep me updated. Meanwhile, in the real world, Grid was back at his day job in a construction office. The manager called out, Mr. Shin Young-woo, collect your pay and go home already. Still lost in his thoughts about the game, Grid didn't respond until a coworker tapped his shoulder. Hey, snap out of it. The boss is calling you. Oh, right. Sorry, Grid mumbled, shuffling over to collect his meager paycheck. As he walked past, 2 coworkers whispered loudly behind his back. That guy. Isn't he just a hopeless gambler? Totally, another replied. He looks like he hasn't slept in days. Smells like it too. Grid overheard, but he didn't have the energy to care. Sitting on a bench outside, he unfolded his paycheck and counted the money. It wasn't much, but it was just enough to cover another round and satisfy. Staring at the crumpled bills, Grid muttered to himself with a bittersweet smile. Just think about it. 1 more round. And who knows what might happen? The first thing to pop into Grid's mind as he sat there, dejected, was the game. His own internal voice immediately scolded him. You should be ashamed of yourself, you fool. Leaning his head back in frustration, Grid muttered, That book alone could have changed my entire life. Hundreds of millions of won, gone. He groaned, still beating himself up over his failed attempt to strike it rich. I spent months in that place, did all that work, and now look at me. I'm starting over at level 1. Again. As Grid wallowed on the bench, gripping his hair as though trying to yank the disappointment out of his skull, Chulho happened to drive by. The head developer of Satisfy glanced at him thoughtfully through the window of his car. Nothing remarkable about this player, he mused to himself, watching Grid sulk. But as the road stretched out ahead of him, Chulho smirked. Still, he added with quiet confidence, there's an advantage to being underestimated. He'll figure it out soon enough. Back on the bench, Grid groaned and tilted his head to the sky. Maybe I should just give up, he muttered. There's gotta be something else I'm good at, right? But no matter how much he racked his brain, the only answer that came to mind was nothing. Am I really this useless? He cried out, his voice echoing in the stillness of the park. His tantrum ended with an unceremonious flop backward, landing him in a bush. After a moment of silence, he sat up, brushed the leaves from his hair, and said slyly, Well, maybe I'll give the game 1 more try. You never know, right? Meanwhile, Chulho was heading home, chuckling to himself in his car. That kid really doesn't know when to quit. No sense of proportion whatsoever, he muttered, shaking his head with a grin. Back at home, Grid climbed back into his game capsule. All right, 1 last game, he muttered, trying to convince himself. This time, I'll see what the legendary class can do. Maybe it'll turn things around. He patted the machine like an old friend. You better work, buddy. I'm counting on you. With a deep breath, Grid activated the system. As the game booted up, he mentally prepared himself. All right, Satisfy. Let's do this. Time to win back all the money I've sunk into you, no matter what it takes. Moments later, Grid respawned in an unfamiliar forest. His first thought was one of confusion. Where am I? This isn't the cave. Looking around at the bleak, leafless trees and the oppressive atmosphere, his confusion turned to irritation. Did they seriously kick me out of the city? All for one little betrayal? Talk about overkill. Wandering through the gloomy forest, Grid grumbled to himself. I need some kind of sign or clue about where I am. His prayers were answered when a structure loomed into view, a temple, standing ominously in his path. Naturally, Grid, being Grid, couldn't resist. Well, I can't just walk past it, he muttered, heading straight for the temple. Inside, dark rituals were underway. Hooded figures chanted incomprehensible spells, their voices reverberating through the stone corridors. Grid peeked around a corner and spotted a girl tied to a cross, surrounded by 4 cloaked figures muttering sinister incantations. His heart sank. Temples like this are meant for high-level players, he thought nervously. And I'm level 1, with the stats of a bug. He opened his menu to confirm his fears, only to have them validated by a system notification. You have unlocked additional crafting bonuses and the ability to equip any item, but penalties will apply. Scanning his inventory, Grid found his old equipment. I can use level 60 gear? He exclaimed. I needed 200 strength points for this before. Without hesitation, he equipped the gear. His sword and armor materialized around him, and a cascade of system notifications followed. Penalties applied. Attack power reduced. Defense reduced. Grid frowned. Figures. Nothing's free. Huh. But as he checked the stats, his mood brightened. Even with penalties, this stuff's 10 times better than anything else I could use right now. Kneeling on the temple floor, he clasped his hands together dramatically. Thank you, legendary class. Truly, I am blessed by the heavens. His joy was short-lived. Looking around, a horrifying realization struck him. Wait a second, he muttered. If this is a high-level dungeon, then everything here is high-level too. He froze, his confidence evaporating. The game is trying to bless me and kill me at the same time. In the sacrificial chamber, the chanting grew louder. The girl on the altar screamed for help, her voice echoing through the halls. Grid peeked into the room again, squinting at the cloaked figures. This must be a temple of Thon. Those monks must be followers of Yatin, he deduced. Which means, staying here is basically a death sentence. His plan was simple. Stay hidden, don't get caught, and get out alive. As long as no one spots me, I'll be fine, he whispered to himself. The universe, of course, had other plans. A hand landed firmly on Grid's shoulder. You! Grid shrieked, swinging his sword wildly as he spun around, but the figure dodged effortlessly. Calm down, kid, the man said, pulling back his hood to reveal his face. Did you really think I was one of them? Grid blinked. The man introduced himself. I'm Doran, a secret guard under the command of Count Steim. Judging by how you're skulking around, I'm guessing you're not one of Yatin's followers. Grid, still catching his breath, managed to reply. Yeah, not one of them. Doran nodded and pointed toward the altar. That girl is Lady Irene, Count Steim's daughter. She was kidnapped by these lunatics during her travels. Grid's eyes widened. Wait, you're saying that's the Count's daughter? Exactly, Doran replied gravely, and I need your help to rescue her. A system notification appeared before Grid. New S-Class quest. Rescue Lady Irene. Grid groaned audibly, slapping his forehead. Another S-Class quest? Why is it always me? Doran, oblivious to Grid's grumbling, added. Most people would be terrified in a place like this, but you seem brave. Grid snorted. Brave? Yeah, sure. Let's go with that. Grid stared at his trembling hands, his mind racing. Why the hell am I not cowering in fear like I usually do? A weakling like me should be a puddle of jelly by now. He wondered if it was some kind of hidden blessing or a game bug. His suspicions were soon confirmed as a system notification appeared before him. Self-control skill unlocked. Effect: resistance to abnormal states has drastically increased. Recovery rate improved. Oh, Grid muttered, blinking in surprise. So that's why. Guess I really need to dive deeper into this class and figure out what else it can do. Turning to Doran, who was grinning confidently, Grid raised an eyebrow. So you're a badass warrior, huh? The gods must really like Count Steim to have sent you. Doran chuckled, his face warm with camaraderie. You honor me, but together we can dash. Yeah, nope. Not happening. Grid cut him off, shaking his head. What? Doran blinked in confusion. You heard me, Grid said, turning to leave. I'm not touching this mess. But you're leaving me to fight all these dark mages alone. Doran protested. Grid threw a hand in the air as if to dismiss the problem. Not my issue. He walked a few steps before biting his lip. 3,000 gold. That's the reward for helping, right? Ugh, another S-rank quest. But still, Doran wasn't giving up, though. You're the only one here who can resist dark energy. I can't do this alone. Please help me. Grid groaned, throwing his hands in the air. For crying out loud, man. That's pure luck. I'm level 1. If I screw this up again, I'll be level 0. Undeterred, Doran pleaded again. But the life of a young lady is in grave danger. How many times do I have to tell you? I can't help you. Grid snapped. You're lying. I can tell you're strong, Doran said confidently. I'm not. Grid barked back. Before Grid could storm off completely, another system notification popped up. Quest activated. Rescue Count Steim's daughter. Grid's eyes bulged. Why? I didn't agree to this. Doran, noticing the notification as well, smiled knowingly. Well, looks like the gods have decided. Now you're an enemy of the Yatin Temple, same as me. We're in this together. Grid's jaw dropped. Who said that? This is all your fault. As if to punctuate Doran's point, a rock that Grid had accidentally kicked during his outburst fell onto the head of a nearby monk, instantly killing him. Doran raised an eyebrow. The monks of Yatin are fanatics who thrive on human sacrifices. You've spilled blood in their temple. They're not going to let you walk out of here alive. Grid's blood ran cold as one of the monks shouted, Blasphemers! Kill them for defiling the children of Yatin. The temple exploded into chaos. Monks swarmed from every direction, their chants growing louder. Grid's face drained of color as he clutched his head. Oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. There's way too many of them. As the monks charged, Grid crouched down on the floor, clutching his knees like a frightened child. Even with my equipment, the penalties are killing me. My stats are barely level 34. I'll die if they so much as sneeze on me. Suddenly, a monk crumpled to the floor beside him, taken out by Doran. The seasoned warrior sliced through the enemies with skill and precision, his knives flashing in the dim light. Grid peeked out from behind his hands, watching in awe. Wait, is Doran really this strong? Who moves that fast in such a cramped space? He began to cling to a sliver of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I won't die if I stick with him. That hope was promptly shattered as more monks poured into the room, shouting, Kill the Anticross! Kill him! Or maybe I will die! Grid yelped, his voice cracking. Doran cut through another wave of enemies and turned to Grid. We can't keep this up forever, he said calmly. Let's finish this quickly. I don't know about this, Grid replied, his voice an octave higher than usual. Ignoring him, Doran grabbed Grid and pushed him forward. Go! Rescue the girl! Grid, stumbling from the unexpected shove, screamed, I'm gonna die! This is it. Goodbye, cruel world. His fall was cut short as Doran cast a levitation spell, gently lowering him to the floor below. That spell will keep you from splattering on the ground, Doran said with a faint smirk. Grid clutched his chest, trembling. I'm alive? I'm alive! He turned to Doran, who was already advancing. There's no time to celebrate, Doran called back. Now show me the strength you've been hiding. Grid wanted to argue that there was no strength to show, but the urgency of the situation stopped him. They burst into the main hall, where the ritual was nearing its climax. The lead monk spotted them and roared, Heretics! Kill them all! The air grew heavy as the monks began chanting in unison, their voices echoing ominously. To the souls of the underworld, we fulfill your wishes. Grid froze, staring at the dark magic swirling around them. What are they doing? Is this some kind of witchcraft? Dark magic, Doran confirmed. And if we don't stop them, it'll get ugly. Without hesitation, Doran launched himself into the fray, slicing through monks like a whirlwind. You think I'd let you finish your spell? Think again. The lead monk shouted to his followers. Buy us time. Stop them at all costs. Grid, still frozen in fear, muttered to himself. This is bad. This is so bad. Standing safely behind Doran, who was effortlessly cutting down waves of enemies, Grid crossed his arms and muttered to himself. Huh, not bad for an NPC. He's handling this temple like it's his backyard. Watching Doran handle everything with ease, Grid allowed a sly grin to creep across his face. If this keeps up, I'll complete this quest without lifting a finger. Perfect. Encouraged by his own plan to do as little as possible, Grid raised his fist in mock enthusiasm and shouted, Keep it up, Doran. You're my hope and support. But as soon as the words left his mouth, a sinister chant filled the air. The monks of Yatan completed their spell, their voices ringing out. Your mind and will shall be suppressed. You will become an empty doll. Dark magic enveloped Doran, who tensed as the spell's black tendrils curled around him. Spell, Doran exclaimed, his voice tinged with alarm. Grid's fake cheer evaporated in an instant. Wait, I take it back. Don't let them turn you into a puppet. I need you. One of the monks grinned ominously. Behold, see what happens to heretics who defy the will of the Great Ones. But instead of succumbing, Doran's eyes burned with defiance. The dark magic dissipated, leaving him unscathed. He drew his blade and snarled, I am the shadow of Count Steim, the sword of mist. No magic can break my resolve. Grid gawked at the display, his jaw practically hitting the floor. He broke through their black magic. Is he even real? What kind of overpowered NPC is this? The monks, undeterred, began chanting another spell. Doran, now angrier than ever, barked. They're preparing another spell. Enough of this nonsense. He dashed forward, his knives flashing as he shouted, You dared to attack the Steim family? There will be no forgiveness. With a burst of speed, Doran hurled his throwing knives straight at the monks. The head monk screamed in terror, Watch out! He scrambled to gather his remaining followers behind a hastily conjured shield, which deflected the attack just in time. As the dust settled, a cold, mocking voice echoed through the temple. I'm afraid I can't let you go any further. Out of the shadows stepped a woman clad in black robes, her presence radiating power and menace. Her lips curled into a wicked smile as she continued, Protecting this ritual is my S-rank quest. Doran's eyes narrowed as he sized up the new arrival. The woman tilted her head with a smirk. Oh, is this why the mission is S-rank? To think my opponent would be the famous Doran. She turned her attention to the altar, where the girl was still tied up, and let out a delighted laugh. It's been a while since I felt this excited. My name is Yura, and I'm ranked first among all black magic players, 5th in the global rankings. You should be honored to face me. Grid's eyes widened as he recognized the name. Yura? The South Korean star who's always on TV. What the hell is she doing here? Yura glanced over at Grid, her gaze lingering on his armor. She chuckled. So, you're the user who accepted this quest. That's quite the setup. You've got their Mammon's sword, Mangel's armor, and yet you're barely level 80? Tough battle for someone like you, don't you think? Grid felt a mix of awe and panic, but he refused to let it show. Plastering on his most confident grin, he shot back, Don't underestimate me. I'm a hero, you know. Taking me down won't be easy even for a top player like you. Yura raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. Hero, huh? Well then, let's see what you're made of. She raised her hands, dark energy swirling around her fingers. I needed a proper challenge to celebrate reaching level 230. Looks like I found it. Doran, unfazed, drew his knives. Step aside, warrior, he said firmly to Grid. This opponent is mine. Before Grid could argue, Doran launched himself at Yura. There is no room for hesitation. If you're even one step faster than your opponent, you have a chance to win, he roared, hurling his knives with precision. Yura dodged gracefully, her movements fluid and calculated. Typical hero talk, she said with a smirk. But I find it tiresome. Suddenly, Doran froze mid-step. His legs were caught in sticky, writhing tendrils of magic. He grimaced and muttered, "My feet!" Grid, watching from the sidelines, could only gape. Tentacles? Why does it always have to be tentacles? Doran wasted no time. Drawing a smaller blade, he sliced through the magical cords and snarled, "You think you can trap me with such a pathetic spell?" He charged again, dodging more tendrils as they lashed out at him. Yura clapped her hands mockingly. "Impressive, but you're burning through your stamina. Let's see how long you last." Doran ignored her taunts and pressed forward, only to hear a faint noise above him. He glanced up and saw globs of blood hovering ominously in the air. His eyes narrowed. "So that's where it's coming from." Yura's voice took on a chilling edge as she raised her hands. "Let me do you a favor. I'll remove the burden your blood places on your body." The globs of blood shot toward Doran, draining the very life from his veins. He gritted his teeth, his body trembling under the assault. Grid, watching in horror, clutched his head. "Damn it, I can't help him. If Doran dies, I'll die too." The battle raged on, with Grid caught between wanting to flee and knowing he had no choice but to stay. This is a nightmare. Why did I accept this quest? As blood drained from Doran's body, the bloody witch Yura stood tall, her crimson magic swirling around her like a storm. "This is my most advanced skill," she declared, her voice dripping with confidence. "It uses all my mana, and it will end you." But just as she prepared to unleash the final blow, her spell fizzled out. The blood magic dissipated like smoke in the wind. "What?" Yura gasped, her composure cracking. Doran stood firm, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Arrogant witch," he growled, his voice heavy with menace. "You think you can defeat me? I'll show you the power that has protected the Steim family for centuries." Yura's face twisted in shock. "A level 1 hypnosis skill? How? How is that even possible?" Grid, watching the chaos from a safe distance, as always, finally spoke up, his voice tinged with nervousness. What just happened? You okay over there, Doran?" Doran held up his hand, displaying a modest-looking ring. "I'm fine thanks to this." Grid's eyes widened as Doran explained. "It's a unique artifact. It's not perfect, but it can block spells like hers and speed up my recovery." As soon as Grid heard the words unique artifact, his opportunistic instincts kicked in. Without hesitation, he blurted out, "Give it to me." Doran stared at him, dumbfounded. "You're kidding, right?" Grid shrugged unapologetically. "What? You don't need it that badly." Doran sighed, shaking his head. "Unbelievable," he muttered before turning his attention back to Yura. "In any case, it's time to end this. No more distractions." He hurled his combat knives at Yura with precision, but she waved her bloody staff, neutralizing the attack in one fluid motion. Her eyes narrowed as she analyzed the situation. "This man should have been dead by now, but he's stronger than I thought." As she recalculated her strategy, her gaze flicked toward Grid. That low-level warrior, he's the wild card, but how dangerous could he possibly be? While Yura strategized, Grid noticed a trio of monks creeping up behind him. His eyes widened as he spun around and bolted toward Doran. "Sir Doran, they're back. The cultists are back." Yura let out an annoyed sigh. "This is ridiculous. I didn't want to rely on NPCs, but these pests are leaving me no choice." Raising her staff, she declared, "This ends now. I'll use my most powerful spell to wipe you all out." Dark energy crackled in the air as she unleashed her ultimate attack. "Dark Storm!" she roared, sending a torrent of magic hurtling toward Doran. Grid, meanwhile, was too busy fleeing from the monks to notice the incoming spell. Without a second thought, he dove behind Doran for cover. Doran saw the spell approaching and gritted his teeth. "This is bad," he muttered, bracing himself. But before he could react, Grid appeared in front of him, arms flailing. "What are you doing?" Doran yelled. There was no time to respond. The spell struck Grid directly, exploding in a deafening blast that rocked the temple. Yura shielded herself from the flying debris, muttering, "A bit much for an indoor fight, but at least they're both dead now. Time to finish the ritual." But as the dust settled, a shocking sight emerged. Grid stood upright, completely unharmed. Yura's eyes widened in disbelief. "What? How?" Grid, glancing at his health bar, let out a small laugh. "1 HP left," he muttered. "Guess that skill legend doesn't die easily actually works." The description of the skill replayed in his mind. At critical health, you become invulnerable for 5 seconds. Smiling, Grid thought to himself, "I'm alive. Against all odds, I'm still here." To Yura, however, that smile looked like the smug grin of a battle-hardened warrior. "Who is this guy?" she muttered, her confidence shaken. "He's just a level 80 player. Isn't he?" As she second-guessed herself, Doran used Grid as a literal springboard, launching himself toward Yura. "The winner is always one step ahead," he shouted, his knives aimed for her chest. Yura barely managed to raise a magical barrier in time. "Don't look at me with that superior attitude," she snapped as her shield deflected the attack. "You've underestimated me." But her triumph was short-lived. When she turned back toward Grid, he was gone. The spot where he had been standing was empty. Her blood ran cold. Where did he go? She thought nervously. Did he log out? No, someone that strong wouldn't just quit. Unbeknownst to her, Grid wasn't plotting a clever counterattack. He was back in the white void of the login screen, staring at a system notification. "You are dead. You have lost 2 levels. Current level." Grid's eye twitched as another message appeared. "You have died twice in the last few hours. You are now locked out of the game for 12 hours. Clenching his fists, he replayed the moment in his head. Doran had literally used him as a springboard, costing him his last bit of HP. That bastard!" Grid shouted, throwing his head back in frustration. Gritting his teeth, his face twisted into an indignant scowl, Grid growled in his head, "I can't believe it. I was killed by my own ally. Doran, you absolute jerk." Meanwhile, back in the temple, the bloody witch Yura stood victorious, though clearly annoyed. Her crimson magic crackled around her, and her brows furrowed as she thought, he dared to give up and flee? How could he even think of pulling such a cowardly move? "I swear, I'll find him someday and make him regret it." At that same moment, back in reality, Grid crawled out of his immersion capsule, his voice booming with rage. "Oh, Doran, you absolute idiot. You forced that quest on me, got me killed, and then had the audacity to use me as a human trampoline. You're the worst." And yet, Grid couldn't shake the thought of Yura's interference. "It's all her fault," he muttered darkly. "If she hadn't shown up, everything would have worked out perfectly. Stupid top-ranked players ruining the game for everyone else." Fuming, Grid sat down at his desktop computer, his eyes narrowing. "Fine," he thought. "This game's cruel. The strong devour the weak. I get it, but that doesn't mean I'm going to sit here and take it." Logging into Yura's social media account, his fingers began flying across the keyboard. "Biggest loser ever. Go away, Yura. Rot in your own spells." Eyes gleaming with petty revenge, Grid leaned back and grinned. He was just thinking about what other insults to hurl when his door burst open. Startled, Grid nearly fell off his chair as his younger sister, Shin Sihi, stepped in. "Appa," she said with a look of exasperation. "Have you completely lost it?" Sihi wrinkled her nose at the state of the room, her gaze darting between piles of trash and her unkempt brother. "Oh my God, Appa. When's the last time you cleaned this place? It reeks. And don't even get me started on your hair. Do you even know what a shower is?" Grid waved her off, clearly offended. "Hey, don't touch anything. Why are you up so early just to nag me?" Ignoring him, Sihi grabbed a trash bag and started tidying up. But as she glanced at the gaming capsule, curiosity flickered across her face. "Can you really make money with this thing?" she asked skeptically. Grid puffed out his chest. "Of course. Satisfy is the most popular game in the world, billions of players. If you're good enough, you can make serious money." Sihi squinted at his monitor, reading aloud. Yura the baddie interfered with a low-level player's quest. "Rotten." Grid froze. His face turned beet red as he stammered, It's not what it looks like. That's not my post. Rolling her eyes, Sihi dropped the trash bag and headed for the door. You're hopeless, Appa. Absolutely hopeless. As the door clicked shut behind her, Grid clenched his fists, his humiliation complete. Damn that Yura. She even ruined my real life. A short while later, with the house blessedly empty, Grid sat down to breakfast, flipping on the TV with a smug grin. Finally, some peace and quiet. Time to enjoy my meal. But as soon as the first channel came on, his mood soured. A live report was playing, and the news anchor's voice cut through the room. This is Lee Kuan-min, Satisfice World News correspondent. I'm here at the Northern Yatan Temple, where a massive incident took place last night. Grid's spoon froze mid-air. On the screen was the very temple he had been in just hours ago, now a smoldering ruin. What the dash? Grid sputtered, spraying cereal across the table. Lee Kuan-min gestured behind him, his expression serious. As you can see, the temple has been completely destroyed. Our investigation reveals that this was the site of a fierce battle. Grid jumped to his feet, pointing wildly at the screen. That's where I was yesterday, the reporter continued. The main suspect in this event is none other than Yura, also known as the Bloody Witch. Ranked 5th in the global rankings, she is known for her incredible magic prowess. A photo of Yura filled the screen, her beauty striking even in the middle of destruction. Yura again? Grid shouted, throwing his hands in the air. Can't I get 5 minutes without her ruining my life? The broadcast cut to an eyewitness interview. A scruffy young man began recounting his experience. So, I was running toward the temple because a monster was chasing me, and that's when I saw Uranim. She was about to cast this insanely powerful spell on some guy. Grid leaned closer to the TV, his heart racing. Was he talking about me? The eyewitness continued, his expression starry-eyed. And let me just say, Uranim is even more beautiful in person. Like, she's perfect. Lee Kuan-min cleared his throat awkwardly. Sir, let's focus on the story, please. Oh, right, the man said sheepishly. Anyway, Uranim fired off her strongest spell. It was incredible. But then something crazy happened. The guy she attacked didn't even get scratched. Grid's jaw dropped. They're talking about me. The reporter looked intrigued. Wait a minute. Are you saying he survived Yura's most powerful spell? Was he a top player? Well, the eyewitness hesitated, rubbing the back of his head. I don't know. A rock fell on me while I was staring at Yura's face, so I kind of died. But man, is she gorgeous. Lee Kuan-min blinked, visibly struggling to maintain his professionalism. Right? No more questions. Grid slumped back into his chair, his emotions a chaotic whirlwind of pride and disbelief. I'm famous, he whispered. Then, louder, I'm famous. The realization hit like a bolt of lightning. Grid shot to his feet, his fists clenched in determination. This is it. My rise to greatness starts now. The eyewitness, having recovered from his dreamy reverie over Yura's beauty, continued with wide-eyed excitement. Something unbelievable happened. It even shocked Uranim herself. She used her strongest spell, but when the attack hit the guy, he didn't even get a scratch. Sitting cross-legged in front of the TV, Grid froze. His jaw slackened as the realization hit him like a well-aimed hammer. I'm famous, he muttered. Slowly, a grin spread across his face as visions of wealth filled his mind. Money, fame, fortune. His thoughts ran wild. Oh, sweet, glorious money. It's all mine. Snapping back to reality, he grabbed his phone with trembling hands. This is destiny, he whispered. No death is in vain. Life is fair after all. Dialing the number for the news station, he cleared his throat and announced with confidence. Hello, this is the Satisfy World News Desk? I'm the guy from Yatan Temple. It's me, the famous one. The call manager replied politely. Sure, could you please tell us your username? Grid, he said proudly, practically beaming. And your current level? The manager asked. I'm at level dash. Grid paused, then mumbled something incoherent before being cut off by the sound of the line going dead. Grid slumped back in his chair, utterly deflated. If it weren't for Yura, he muttered bitterly. As he wallowed in his misery, the news segment continued. We've just received exclusive footage from the scene, the anchor announced. Grid perked up, his disappointment momentarily forgotten. Footage? Wait, are they going to show me? But the screen displayed something else entirely. The camera panned over Doran and Irene, emerging from the ruins of the temple. Grid's eyes widened. Doran! He saved her. The broadcast showed the exhausted Doran helping Irene limp out of the destroyed temple. Irene, with a soft expression of gratitude, murmured to him, "Your suffering is finally over. Thank you, Doran." Grid gritted his teeth, recalling the ring Doran had worn. A good man. With a very nice magic ring, he thought greedily. You should have handed that over to me. The news moved on to a new segment, but Grid, feeling exhausted by the emotional roller coaster, flopped onto his couch. Time for a nap, he yawned. Before he could drift off, the TV blared. Up next, an exclusive interview with Satisfice Rising Star. Grid squinted at the screen, curiosity piqued. The reporter turned to a guest who confidently introduced himself. "I'm Katz, and I'm sure you all know me." Grid sat up straight, his face scrunched in disbelief. "Katz? That guy's famous for being an arrogant idiot. Isn't he the son of some big-shot CEO? Ugh, his voice is already annoying me." The reporter smiled and asked, "Mr. Katz, your place in the global rankings has skyrocketed. Everyone is dying to know your secret." Katz smirked and replied smugly, "Oh, really? I mean, it's not a secret, it's just raw skill." Grid rolled his eyes so hard it almost hurt. Yeah, right. If smugness were a skill, he'd be ranked #1. But then Katz said something that made Grid freeze. "By the way," Katz said, gesturing to the camera, "this is a Korean channel, right? Which means Yura's at the top of your rankings. Listen up, Yura, your reign is over. I'm coming for the global top spot, and I'll dance on your grave when I get there." Grid's eyes bulged. What the hell? 53% arrogance, 47% stupidity. How dare he trash-talk her? Even I know she's a monster in this game. Katz then reached into his inventory and pulled out a sword, holding it up for the camera. "You want to know my secret? It's all thanks to this sword." Grid leaned forward, inspecting the weapon. "That's it? Looks like any other high-end weapon. What's the big deal?" Suddenly, Katz activated a skill. The sword glowed ominously, radiating a sinister energy. Grid's jaw dropped. What did he do to that sword? Grinning wickedly, Katz explained, "This is my passive skill. Any weapon I hold transforms into this form. It lets me absorb health based on my attack power, so the more I fight, the faster I recover." The reporter gasped, clearly impressed. "Wow, I've never heard of such a skill before." "Of course you haven't," Katz sneered. "It's exclusive to my epic class, the Blood Warrior." Grid's head was spinning. Another hidden class. And it's this powerful, motivated by envy and ambition. He clenched his fists. "I need to show the world what the descendant of Pagma can do." Fueled by determination, Grid logged back into Satisfy. He appeared in the bustling city of Byron and received a system notification. "You have entered Byron. This is your new respawn point." Looking around, Grid muttered to himself, "So this is Byron. Never been here before. Guess I got booted out of the temple because I'm an enemy of the Church of Yatan now." His thoughts were interrupted by a player shouting over the din of the marketplace. "Looking for a mage, level 100 and up, heading to the ruins of Mobide." Grid smirked. Time to get back in the game. In the middle of the bustling square, Grid's ears perked up as he caught snippets of recruitment calls echoing through the crowd. "Looking for level 100 plus players for a raid on the Forest Guardian. We're going for blue orichalcum." Grid muttered to himself. "Wow, they're all recruiting players at level 100 or higher. I guess that makes sense if the monsters around here are that strong." He glanced at his own pitiful stats and sighed deeply. "Meanwhile, I'm here at level..." He couldn't even finish the thought without cringing. Hanging his head, Grid groaned internally. "At this rate, I'm gonna starve to death. I need to find a way to survive and fast." As his gaze swept the square, his eyes locked onto a trolley parked nearby. Hope flickered in his heart. Yes, a trolley. Safe and easy transportation. Sprinting over, he called out to the cart driver, "Excuse me, are you available? I need a ride to the nearest beginner-friendly town." The driver, a grizzled man who looked like he'd seen it all, gave a curt nod. "Winston, perfect for newbies." "Great." Grid said eagerly. The driver squinted at him. That'll be 10 gold pieces. Grid froze. 10? Are you serious? The driver shrugged. Take it or leave it. Desperately, Grid opened his inventory to check his savings. A sad little window popped up, displaying his grand total. 3 gold, 11 silver. He swallowed hard. Well, Grid started, trying to sound casual. Maybe we can negotiate dash. Get lost? The driver interrupted. Grid blinked. Wait. I haven't even said anything yet. I know what you're going to say, the driver snapped. You'll spin some sob story about your sick mother and ask for a discount. I've heard it all before. Now scram. Left with no options, Grid slumped against a wall, muttering bitterly. Ruthless children of capitalism. Why does everyone want my non-existent gold? He sighed heavily, tears of frustration pricking at the corners of his eyes. Stuck here, I'm just going to rot away. Damn it, Asher. This is all your fault. He clenched his fists, shouting dramatically to the sky. Do you know how much money I spent on that stupid quest? And now I'm broke, starving, and stuck with a useless class. But then, as if struck by divine inspiration, Grid straightened up. Wait a second. Useless class? No, I'm the heir of Pagma. A grin crept across his face as hope returned. I don't need a handout, I can make money myself. I'm a blacksmith. I can craft items, sell them, and level up at the same time. Fired up with determination, Grid opened his class window and reviewed his skills. All right, let's see what I've got to work with. His eyes scanned the descriptions, and he muttered excitedly, Item stats increase by, my reputation goes up with each creation. Oh, and this one boosts my crafting success rate. This is incredible. He couldn't help but grin as he reviewed his progress. I've already mastered intermediate blacksmithing, and I've unlocked the legendary crafting skill. Advanced level blacksmithing skills are practically unheard of. I'm amazing. With his confidence soaring, Grid clicked on the legendary crafting skill. A system notification appeared. Legendary blacksmithing activated. What item would you like to create? Grid's eyes lit up. Of course, a two-handed sword. Hunting will be faster, and I can level up in no time. The next prompt appeared. What materials would you like to use? Grid scratched his head, pondering. Materials? Something strong, obviously. Then he remembered the man in the square shouting about blue orichalcum. His face split into a sly grin. That's it, blue orichalcum. Fancy and powerful. After inputting the materials, another window popped up. Please design your item. Grid's grin widened as he grabbed a virtual pencil. All right, let's make something epic. He started sketching, mumbling to himself. It'll be cool and big like Shark Big. Heavy but somehow light. Dark but also shiny. And its attack power? Off the charts. 10 million meteors should fall with every swing. As the design took shape, Grid admired his masterpiece. This sword will be unstoppable. One swing to rule them all. Blushing slightly at his own brilliance, he added, It's like an anchovy and a shark fused together. It's perfect. Satisfied, Grid submitted the design. A system notification popped up. Automatic correction activated. Adjusting your design for balance and feasibility. Grid froze. Wait, what? Automatic correction? He watched as the system took over his masterpiece, tweaking the design until it was unrecognizable. Hey, I didn't consent to this. It's my sword. But deep down, he admitted, okay, maybe I went a little overboard. A few moments later, the final version appeared. The system chimed, correction complete. Item parameters adjusted. Grid stared at the finished product. His earlier frustration gave way to awe. Even though it's not exactly what I drew, this is amazing. The class effects really kicked in. Before him stood a gleaming two-handed sword. Its stats displayed proudly in a system window. Strength plus 50, attack plus 100, defense plus 30, agility plus 15. Additional effects included low probability to block enemy attacks, high chance of cutting through armor, and increased effectiveness in dark areas. Grid beamed. It worked. I feel like a real blacksmith now. But then his eyes drifted lower to the requirements section, and his joy turned to horror. Level restriction, 100. Requires advanced swordsmanship skill. Grid's face fell. What kind of unfair level restriction is this? I'm nowhere near level 100. He slumped back against the wall, despair washing over him. Even the first-ranked player isn't at level 100 yet. How am I supposed to use this? Yet, despite his complaints, a spark of determination remained in his heart. No matter what it takes, I'll prove that the descendant of Pagma is the greatest class ever, even if I have to fight every capitalist cart driver along the way. Grid sat down heavily on the ground, his newly crafted sword gleaming beside him like a cruel joke. Staring at the system notification outlining the ridiculous restrictions on the weapon, he grumbled in his head, even if I poured every single extra point I have into strength, even if I was the best blacksmith in history, I'd still need advanced-level sword skills to wield this monstrosity. He sighed deeply, running his hands through his hair in frustration. I've done it, he muttered aloud. I've created garbage. Rare, shark-shaped garbage. The sword, with all its absurd stats and impractical restrictions, felt like a direct slap in the face. What's the point of a legendary class if it only churns out weapons no one can use? But then, like a spark of hope piercing through a storm cloud, a realization struck him. Wait a second. The restrictions don't apply to me. His eyes darted to the sword lying innocently behind him, its blade shimmering with a faint glow. Grid straightened up, determination flickering in his eyes. If I can use it, then it's just like my old equipment. Sure, there might be penalties, but this sword will still be stronger than anything else. That's the silver lining. Grabbing the weapon, Grid inspected it more closely. Its shark-inspired design was as absurd as his initial vision. Jagged, oversized, and downright ridiculous. Yet it radiated power, and Grid could feel his confidence clawing its way back. He smirked, gripping the hilt tightly. I'll make this work. No matter the penalties, this sword is my ticket to success. And to survive in this world, I need to get into that raid against the Forest Guardian. If I don't, well, I'll just die broke and alone. Shoving himself to his feet, Grid resolved to join the raid group at any cost. I just need to make sure I stay as far from the front lines as possible. Let the others take the hits. I'll swoop in, take the loot, and get out. Easy. Moments later, he arrived at the bustling square where recruitment for the Forest Guardian raid was in full swing. Players were scattered around, forming groups and discussing strategies. Standing tall and clutching his newly crafted sword like a trophy, Grid marched up to the nearest recruiter. I'd like to join your group, he declared with a grin that barely masked his desperation. The recruiter, a burly warrior clad in heavy armor, eyed him up and down before bursting into laughter. You want to join our group? Yeah, no, absolutely not. Grid's grin faltered. What? Why not? You're barely level 1, the recruiter scoffed. You think you can handle the Forest Guardian? Don't make me laugh. Go find a beginner's dungeon or something. Grid's eye twitched as he clenched his fists. Oh, you'll regret this. Just wait until I show you what this legendary sword can do. Thanks for watching, guys. Comment Flamingo and subscribe for future parts. Hearing the outright rejection, Grid blinked, stunned. Wait, what? He wasn't used to being dismissed so quickly. This team is for players level 100 and above, the recruiter said flatly, arms crossed. Judging by your equipment, you're what, level 60 at best? Grid coughed awkwardly, waving a dismissive hand. Oh, don't let appearances fool you. I'm totally level 100. My gear just doesn't matter because, you see, I'm amazing with weapons. Silence. One of the team members scoffed. What, are you implying we rely too much on our items? Another chimed in, rolling his eyes. Yeah, Grid. Who do you think you are, looking down on us? And then came the kicker. Someone in the group muttered just loud enough for him to hear. Look at this beggar. No accessories, no presents. He'll bolt the moment things get tough. Guarantee he's lying about his level. Grid's face twitched. Excuse me? Just as the hostility was reaching a boiling point, a firm voice called out, All right, enough. The crowd turned. Mr. Regis? One of the players gasped, standing straighter. The tension immediately shifted as the legendary figure stepped forward. Since our guild is taking responsibility for the boss, Regis said with confidence, we can afford to let others join in on the action. A hushed murmur spread through the crowd. Holy crap, That's Regis from the Tzedaka Guild, one player whispered. I've never seen him in person before. Another breathed, eyes wide. Grid's ears perked up at the whispers. Regis, oh yeah, he's that martial arts freak. Number 1 in the hand-to-hand combat rankings. He fights without fancy equipment because of skill restrictions. And he's already level 200? Grid turned to look at Regis properly, immediately feeling a deep sense of injustice. How is it that some people just look like protagonists? He's got that cool, effortless vibe while I'm out here getting mocked in the streets. One of the team members, still skeptical, turned to Regis. Sir, even if you like giving people a chance, there have to be limits. We can't just take in random nobodies. Regis, completely ignoring him, pointed at Grid with a smile. The more people, the easier it is to clear the area, right? Grid's eyes gleamed. Oh, you poor naive man. You're so easy to take advantage of. Still, another guild member hesitated. I get what you mean, but how do we convince the others? Grid's grin widened. Yes, listen to the ranker. He's got the right idea. Regis clapped his hands together. Simple. Let's have a one-on-one match to test his abilities. If he proves he's got control, then problem solved. Grid's expression froze. What? The blood drained from his face. No. That is not part of the plan. Regis was already warming up, stretching casually. All right, let's get started. One of the team members nodded approvingly. That's a great idea. If he wins, no one will have any complaints. Grid's mind raced. Okay, I need a plan, a brilliant strategy, a masterful escape. And then, in the most dramatic display of cowardice possible, Grid suddenly clutched his foot, yelping, Oh no, my left foot control. I really need to work on that. Such a shame. With a performance worthy of an award, he flung off his slipper for extra effect and bolted in the opposite direction. Regis blinked. Did he just run away? One of the players sighed. Yeah, that happened. Regis rubbed his chin. Weird. I really thought we'd work well together. As Grid sprinted through the streets, he muttered frantically, Crisis averted. But damn it, I still need money for that wagon ride. Arriving back at the spot where he had previously crafted his masterpiece, a system notification popped up. Please name your created item. Grid stared at his sword, now prompting him for a title. He frowned. Why bother naming this defective trash? But then realization dawned. Wait, I get it now. He looked at the interface with newfound understanding. The creation skill has limited slots. I can't just waste them. I need to be strategic. Staring at his first ever crafted weapon, he smirked. All right, fine, I'll name it. Typing into the interface, he declared, Bugged Shark Slayer, a legendary start. Determined to make some money, Grid headed toward the nearest forge. The sign read, Smith's Forge. Perfect. Pushing the door open, he confidently announced, I'd like to dash, get lost. The words slammed into him like a hammer to the gut. Grid blinked. Ha! Without looking up from his work, the blacksmith, a burly man with arms like steel beams, growled. I said, get out. I don't have time for cocky kids who think they know better. Grid, refusing to back down, cleared his throat. No, you misunderstand. I'm here to work. Smith finally glanced up, unimpressed. Work? Yes, I'm a blacksmith myself. You see, Smith slammed his hammer down, cutting him off. Blueprints are good sellers. But you're just another brat who thinks blacksmithing is easy. Grid gulped. The blacksmith snorted. Let me guess. You don't even know the basics, do you? You just want to make some quick cash, right? Grid, feeling like he was being personally attacked, coughed. I mean, is that so wrong? Smith's glare intensified. Yes. The silence stretched painfully. Then, shaking his head, Smith sighed, muttering, Kids these days. He grabbed a log from a nearby pile and chucked it at Grid. Grid fumbled, barely catching it. What dash? Stop crying against my wall and go chop some firewood, Smith ordered gruffly. A system notification popped up. New quest. Firewood collection, chop 20 logs of firewood. Reward. Bronze coins plus experience. Grid, staring at the log in his hands, sighed dramatically. This is my grand journey as a legendary blacksmith? Chopping wood. Dragging himself to the backyard, he grabbed an old axe and grumbled, "Fine, at least it's a normal quest for once." He rubbed the axe's handle, then frowned. "Wait, if this game is so realistic, can I fail at chopping wood too?" Curious, he activated his appraisal skill on the axe. Old axe, normal grade durability, 23/50ths attack power, 15 to 28 second notification popped up. "You have learned to craft old axe." Grid blinked. Then, slowly, a grin spread across his face. "Wait, did I just learn how to make this?" Forgetting about chopping wood entirely, he rubbed his chin. "If I can learn from appraising items, this might actually be useful." Excitement bubbled up as a plan started forming in his mind. Maybe, just maybe, his blacksmithing class wasn't useless after all. Taking a deep breath, Grid tightened his grip on the axe, eyes locked onto the logs before him. A glowing red line appeared across the wood, guiding where he should strike. Huh? Why is there a target line? He wondered. But hey, no need to question free help. With a single, precise swing, the axe cleaved straight through the log like a hot knife through butter. Grid's jaw dropped. Whoa! Instant split. Excitement surged through him. This is amazing, he muttered under his breath, then declared triumphantly, "Knowledge is power." Fueled by the sweet taste of efficiency, Grid hacked away at the logs with newfound vigor. "If I master the knowledge of legendary blacksmithing, soon I'll be chopping entire forests in one swing," he boasted to himself. But 2 hours later, Grid lay sprawled on the ground, limbs limp, face twisted in agony. His once enthusiastic chopping had slowed to a pitiful wheeze, the axe now feeling like a 1,000-ton burden in his hands. "Damn my stamina," he groaned. "I only managed 150 logs." Still, somewhere in the depths of his soul, the flickering flame of determination refused to die out. Dragging himself up with the grace of a zombie, Grid reached for his axe, whispering, "I have to push through. I must escape this town." With one last burst of energy, he threw himself back into chopping, mentally chanting like a warrior on his last stand, "Just one more, just one more." And then, suddenly, system notification. Stamina attribute unlocked. Grid froze mid-swing, blinking as a new ability window popped up. Stamina attribute. You don't get tired as easily. Carrying capacity increased. Fullness duration increased. Every 10 points in stamina increases endurance. The boy gasped, nearly dropping his axe. This is a legendary skill. As if on cue, his exhaustion melted away, replaced by a renewed sense of vigor. Grid flexed his arm, feeling the strength coursing through him. "No wonder my fatigue disappeared. I feel 10 years younger." With newfound confidence, he wiped the sweat from his brow and declared, "All right, no more whining. Time to finish this job." And so, Grid powered through the remaining logs, cutting down every single piece of firewood in the yard. By the time he was done, he collapsed onto a nearby bench, utterly spent but victorious. Moments later, Smith emerged from the forge, his eyes wide as he surveyed the aftermath. "You cut 1,000 logs? In 6 hours?" Grid, barely keeping his face composed, waved a dismissive hand. "That was nothing." Smith squinted at him. "Nothing? Of course. I am a blacksmith after all." Grid puffed out his chest. The blacksmith eyed him with a mixture of suspicion and amusement. "You? A blacksmith?" Before Grid could launch into another speech about his greatness, Smith tossed a pickaxe at him. "All right, hotshot. If you're so skilled, prove it. Go mine some iron ore. New quest. Mine 20 units of iron ore rewards. Blacksmith experience plus bonus gold." Grid's eyes sparkled at the mention of experience points. "This will bring me back to my original level." "I accept," he shouted, sprinting toward the mines like a man possessed. Unfortunately, reality hit him like a brick wall about 5 minutes into the journey. Leaning on his pickaxe for dear life, Grid wheezed, How is this place? So far, what should have been a simple 30-minute walk had turned into a 2-hour death march. His heavy, high-level armor made every step feel like dragging a mountain behind him. Staring up at the rocky path ahead, he let out a bitter laugh. "My level is low, but I'm wearing level 70 gear. No wonder I move like a slug. I should just take this stuff off. Then he immediately shut down that thought. No. What if I get attacked? Gritting his teeth, Grid somehow forced himself to the entrance of the mine. A group of rugged miners paused their work to stare at the panting, sweat-drenched young man standing before them. One nudged his friend and snickered. Hey, look at this guy. Says he's here to mine iron for Smith. The other miner squinted at Grid. What's with this bony fellow? He looks like he'll snap in half before he picks up a rock. Grid, hearing everything, twitched. The miners continued their banter, loud enough for him to hear. I bet he'll be a total nuisance. Yeah, we don't have time to babysit some newbie. One of them finally turned to Grid. All right, listen. Don't get in our way. Just go to that corner and swing your pickaxe at the wall. Pretend like you're doing something useful. Grid, fists clenched, forced himself to stay calm. Oh, you just wait. You'll see. The miners went back to work, fully expecting Grid to struggle. Then he raised his pickaxe. With a single swing, crack. A chunk of iron or the size of a boulder broke free from the rock wall. The entire mine went silent. The miner who had mocked him earlier stood frozen, his jaw practically on the floor. Hold on. Since when was it that easy to mine iron? Or another gulped. And he's still wearing armor. Grid, dripping sweat but grinning like a maniac, ignored them completely. My body is dying, but my spirit is untouchable. His pickaxe struck again and again and again. Even a nobody like me can rise to greatness. Just watch. With expert precision, he picked up a pair of tongs and carefully hardened the arrowheads, sealing in their deadliness. Smith examined the finished product and let out a low whistle. Now that's a fine piece of work. Just stick the tip on, and you're done. Grid held up the arrow, inspecting his handiwork. This is actually kind of fun. He had spent days working like a dog, yet for the first time he enjoyed it. Me? Enjoying work? Impossible. Just as he was about to call it finished, something weird started happening. The arrow in his hands began glowing. Purple light flickered around it like some divine blessing or maybe an ominous curse. Grid's eyes widened. What the hell is going on? A system notification popped up. The breath of the legendary blacksmith has been activated. And just like that, the arrow burst into a full-on epic glow, radiating an aura of sheer excellence. Grid's jaw nearly hit the floor. Task complete. Due to the creation of an epic item, all attributes have increased. Your reputation has risen across the continent. His hands trembled. I created an epic item? Smith, on the other hand, practically exploded with excitement. Incredible! He threw his arms in the air like a proud father. A guy who looks like he'd struggle to hammer a nail just made something this magnificent. Kid, you're a prodigy. Grid blinked. Then his shoulders slumped. Great. An epic arrow. Smith frowned. Hey, what's with that face? Grid rubbed his forehead. I wanted a badass sword. A blade so powerful that enemies would tremble at my feet. Instead, I got... He looked at the arrow in his hand. A stick with a pointy end. Still, after reading the stats, he had to admit this wasn't just any arrow. Among all the existing arrows in Satisfy, there wasn't a single one that dealt more than 40 damage. This one ignored enemy defenses. Grid's mood lifted slightly. Actually, this is better than most one-handed swords. Determined to make the best of his newfound talent, he turned to Smith. All right, I'm out of here. Smith's face fell. Already? Grid nodded. If fate allows, we'll meet again. Before he could step out, Smith suddenly reached behind his forge and tossed him a bundle. Take these with you. I can't let something this valuable just sit in my shop. A system notification popped up. You have received Jaffa arrows, X1, and Jaffa ingots, X3. Grid's eyes sparkled. He gave me so much just because we got along. He turned back to Smith. You really looked after me. Thanks, old man. Smith, suddenly bashful, fidgeted with his fingers. Well, it'd be nice if we could, live together. Grid choked on air. Don't say things like that. Throwing the gifts onto his back, Grid huffed. These weigh a ton, but at least they'll sell well. With one last wave, he strode toward his new future. Watch out. World Gridnim is coming to sell some top-tier merchandise. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, The battle against the Forest Guardian was turning into a bloodbath. The towering boss wasn't just a mindless brute, it was summoning an army of stone golems to crush the raiding party. And they were being crushed. Bodies lay scattered across the battlefield, warriors barely holding on. The only thing keeping them from being completely wiped out? A single deadly archer. Jishuka, the guild master of Tsadaka. Her bow gleamed in the firelight, and with a single arrow, she pierced 3 golems at once, shattering them into rubble. Scowling, she shouted, "Idiots! I warned you about the golems." Among the fighters was none other than Ragus, the taekwondo master, dodging boulders like a ninja. Another was Tobin, the same guy who had rejected Grid from their team back in the square. Then there was Vantner, an axe-wielding warrior built like a walking tank. Despite their strength, Jishuka sighed in frustration. Most of the mercenaries we hired are already dead. Useless. She stepped forward, standing beside the defeated Forest Guardian, surveying the mess. One of her guildmates muttered, "Our losses were bad." Jishuka pulled out the loot drop, 30 units of black metal, 7 units of orichalcum, or 1 unit of blue orichalcum. Ragus grumbled. "No amethyst shield again?" Vantner cracked his knuckles. "At least we got the blue orichalcum. We fought all day and barely made it out." Jishuka turned to Tobin. "How many did we lose?" Tobin hesitated. "75, including some of our own." Jishuka gritted her teeth. "These S-rank chain quests, they're harder than we expected." But this was just the beginning. And elsewhere, completely oblivious to the carnage, a certain legendary blacksmith was marching toward the city, ready to peddle some arrows like his life depended on it. The labor exchange manager gathered the desperate job seekers in front of him, clearing his throat like a king about to distribute life-changing decrees. "The Shinwoo construction site needs 4 workers," he declared. Grid, eyes gleaming with opportunity, shot his hand up. His moment had finally arrived. But before he could so much as exhale his willingness, some burly guy shoved him aside like a crumpled lottery ticket and bellowed, "Here!" while striding forward. Grid blinked in stunned silence. What just happened? Was there a rule that only the strongest elbows got jobs? Watching the man's selfish, backstabbing spine retreat into the crowd, Grid clenched his fists and grumbled. "You could have at least let the poor unemployed youth through, you brute." The manager, completely unfazed, continued, "Moving on. I need 3 experienced tilers." Once again, Grid attempted to stake his claim, hand poised in a dignified manner only to be smacked in the face by a flying palm as another man bulldozed past him. This time, Grid had enough. "What the hell? I need money too. Stop shoving me around, you greedy old men." The crowd went quiet, shifting awkwardly. The manager sighed, rubbing his temples. "Enough of the whining. We don't have time for street brawls." With a no-nonsense expression, he handed out electric cables to the newly chosen workers. Grid visibly shuddered. Electrical work? He had attempted this gig once last year, and his medical bills had cost more than his earnings. No thanks. But before he could gracefully remove himself from the danger zone, one of the old bastards yanked his hand up for him. "Come on, we've got a lot of work to do," the evildoer said, dragging him away. "Hey, you snakes!" Grid roared, but everyone conveniently pretended not to hear him. Later, at home, dragging his sore, overworked body through the door, Grid groaned, "I'm heading out now." His mother, already angrily wielding a rice spoon like a weapon, barked, "Where are you running off to so early? Finish your damn breakfast." Grid sighed. Why did they always delay his plans? "I have to go to the labor exchange," he grumbled. Hearing this, his father, who had been quietly sipping tea, suddenly spoke up. "Wait a little longer. Sit down." Grid hesitated, staring at him. Why? What does he want? His daily loan payments left him with barely enough money to eat, and time was ticking. Then his father handed him money. "For the day's earnings," he said simply. "Rest today." Grid lit up like a Christmas tree. "Dad, you're the best." Until he actually counted the money. 70,000. 1. Grid's smile shattered. A whole day's wage was at least 1,000. This was pocket change. His younger sister, Sihi, shot him a disgusted look. "God, be grateful for what you're given." She then handed him a bath pass. "We've prepared a bath for you. Go relax." Grid glanced at his family, all gathered in the morning, waiting for him to eat with them. For a moment, his heart warmed. They're here just for me. Then greed struck. Maybe you guys could also pay off my debt? A bowl of rice flew at his face. Some time later, Grid settled into his capsule and logged in. Within seconds, he was back in the virtual world. Stretching his limbs in the game, he mumbled, "The instant connection is great and all, but my bank account is still at 0. He opened the auction tab to check the price of his arrows, hoping for some good news. Then he froze. His jaw hit the floor. What? The system had completed his auction, flashing a winning bid notification for his epic arrows. 72 silver per arrow. I'm rich. In just 6 hours, he had made a fortune. Grid practically teleported to the auction house, waving his hands like a lunatic. Give me my money, my beautiful, shiny gold coins. The seller calmly handed over his earnings. Here's your gold. Oh, and there's a commission fee on epic items. Grid stopped dead. Then, realizing how much the system had shaved off his earnings, he clutched the bag of money to his chest and screamed, "You damn capitalists!" Having made enough money to escape his miserable city, Grid immediately booked a carriage ride to Winston Village. Then he nearly had a heart attack. "How much?" he screeched. The carriage driver snorted. "I gave you a discount. Do you think driving a carriage is easy?" Grid begrudgingly paid up, muttering curses under his breath. As they rode toward Winston, he idly asked, "By the way, you said this village is called Winston, right?" The driver nodded. "Yes, but with the population boom, it might soon become a city. I hear the heir to the Stame family might take over as mayor." Grid narrowed his eyes. "Stame? Where have I heard that before?" Before he could connect the dots, the driver pointed ahead. "There it is," he announced. Grid looked up and felt his exhaustion vanish. Winston was huge, 4 times bigger than Byron, bustling with players and NPCs alike. "Finally," he whispered, "a fresh start." Determined to lighten his load, Grid opened his inventory. "I need to drop some weight. Let's start with my armor," he muttered, selecting Mangel's armor and Mammon's sword. With a smirk, he added, "Let's see how much these bad boys are worth. If my skill with weapons and armor improves, my penalties should decrease, right?" Grid, ever the genius strategist, activated his learning skill, watching the magical system notifications pop up like fireworks. Your skill with the 2-handed sword of Mammon has increased. Your skill with Mangel's armor has improved. "Ha!" he mused, scratching his chin. Unlike that old axe, these didn't max out instantly. Interesting. Another notification popped up. Mammon's 2-handed sword penalty reduced from attack power down -30% to attack power down -20%. Mangel's armor penalty reduced from defense down -50% to defense down -35%. Grid pumped his fist in victory. Hell yeah, at least this is progress. Then he noticed something else. Wait, the durability's tanking. If I repair them, my understanding of the equipment increases. But I'm broke. Crap. Step 1. Get rich or die. Trying. Grid stomped toward the vault, the sacred institution where poor players paid a fortune to store their items. Time to get some gold and experience. And by some, I mean as much as humanly possible. The vault clerk barely looked up. Storage costs 10 silver per item. Grid gritted his teeth. Money, money, money. This game is just capitalism on steroids. Still, he begrudgingly agreed, stuffing everything into storage except for a single Jaffa arrow. I'll keep this as a memento. Also, I refuse to pay 10 silver for a damn arrow. The second he stepped out, he felt like a free man. I'm light as a feather now. Time to find a blacksmith. Step 2. Blacksmith or bust. Walking through Winston, Grid noticed something interesting. Near the entrance, weak, broke, and hopeful noobs in tattered gear. Further inside, players with actual gear and ambition. Ah, a zone for all levels, he noted. The forge has to be nearby. When he finally found it, his jaw dropped. Holy hell, this place is huge. It wasn't just some dinky, rundown forge. This was an advanced class blacksmithing workshop, possibly even higher. Yes, this is exactly what I need. The second he stepped inside, a system notification popped up. Blacksmith's technique, Master NPC effect advanced blacksmiths and above will treat you well. Grid blinked. Wait, advanced blacksmiths and above will treat me well. He looked around. The place was a mess. Where the hell is everyone? Then, from the back, a voice groaned. Who the hell are you? Grid jumped. Oh, someone's here. Thanks for watching, guys. Comment Flamingo and subscribe for future parts.